Hi, and welcome back to Microscope by Telescope Advisors, the podcast where we zoom in on the systems, strategy, and leadership decisions shaping the future of mortgage and housing finance. I'm Julia Brown, the operator, advisor, and founder of Telescope, and today we're diving into one of the most misunderstood, overhyped topics in our industry right now, AI. You cannot go to a mortgage conference today without every panel or every presenter using the word AI, but kind of as a buzzword or a headline. But the actual application of AI inside real businesses is where I want to take our conversation today, where workflows break, where compliance matters, and where leadership has to decide what gets automated and what absolutely should not be. Joining me today is Brooke Anderson-Thomkins, founder of Bridge AI Advisory, a firm focused on helping organizations bridge the gap between artificial intelligence strategy and practical execution. Brooke doesn't approach AI as though it's a shiny object. She approaches it as an operating lever, one that, when implemented correctly, enhances human judgment instead of replacing it. In this conversation, we're unpacking where leaders are getting AI wrong, how to evaluate AI through a systems lens, what responsible adoption actually means, and how to think about AI as an executive decision, not just a technology purchase. If you're a CEO, COO, or transformation leader trying to cut through the noise and make smart, grounded decisions about AI, this episode is for you. Brooke, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Julia. It's great to see you. Appreciate you having me and excited to dive into all the topics you just described, right? There's so much to say and so much to do in positive ways as not only mortgage banking, but the regulatory environment and so many things keep moving really at paces that we're just not accustomed to.
You can say that again. And one of the things that I didn't get a chance to say in your introduction was that you had a decades-long career as an executive in mortgage, not just an executive president of mortgage companies. And it interests me personally when we're talking to think, and you hit the restart button and went into AI and really an immersive learning experience around AI to build Bridge AI Advisory. So before we jump into AI itself, can we talk for a second about why you chose this
How did I
field?
get here? Like,
Yeah, how'd you get here?
how did this happen? Well, thank you. I'm happy to do that. After leading an IMB for almost 16 years, I needed to take a step back for family purposes in 2023. And when I did that, I resigned, but I didn't retire. I just didn't know what the timelines and so forth would be. So when time was right and I was looking at next, literally through that time span, AI was in virtually every headline. I mean, you just couldn't literally top of the news, top of the newspaper, whatever. And long story short, I went to the IMB, or excuse me, the MBA in March, or excuse me, that, holy smokes, got to back up. Um,
Is it
to
annual?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Annual in 2023, earned with 3 questions, and they were not AI directly related, but they were to confirm what I thought I knew. Ask senior level executives, when was the last time you did a large scale project that was on time and on budget?
Mhm.
Most laughed at me. Some gave me a few choice 4-letter words. Yeah, it was, some who knew me well. Second was at the point at which the project was finished, did it accomplish what you understood it was designed to do? Understandably mixed bag response there, right? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes different. Um, and the third question was, you went into it with the expectation of a certain level of adoption in order to ultimately make the investment worth it, i.e., your ROI. Do you have the level of adoption you needed in order to make it worth it? And it immediately dropped into, oh my gosh, Brooke, do you know anything about salespeople? They never do what you ask. Do you know anything about compliance? Have you ever met our legal team? And it just like morphed into like, whoa. And I laughed because I actually have sat in those roles. I was an originator at one point. I was head of compliance at one point. So I understood where they were coming from. Fast forward to what was my next, because all I could think about in the context of artificial intelligence was, had I been in my former role, how would I have made good decisions based on what I was seeing in the news? And truth be told, I was going beyond the headlines. I was doing a lot of reading at the time.
Sure.
And it was clear to me that this was different. But I didn't really, at the time, couldn't really put my hands on what was really different about it, that um, it was gonna change the world, so to speak, literally, change the world. So I went back to school, UC Berkeley and the Mila Institute, and then spent the next course of the next year between coursework and some exercises of figuring out how did I take what I knew about the mortgage arena as being a leader, a lender, and an entrepreneur, and apply it to be able to lean into possible and truly make this different. Right? Mortgage banking in particular isn't necessarily known for its speed of change.
No, it's not. And I don't think it's known for getting it right
Mhm.
early on either
Unfortunately, yeah,
in,
you're right.
in technology. Um, one of the things that interests me is how we use the word AI in mortgage and how AI is defined more broadly. I've talked to a lot of companies, obviously, with Telescope Advisors. I come into organizations and a tech stack analysis is a service that my company offers. And folks will say, oh, I use AI for this, or we have AI here, we have AI here. And when we pull back the curtain, what we see is we've got a lot of bots, or we've got some RPA, we've got some OCR, there's some machine learning. And I'm thinking to myself, what is the actual definition of AI? How do we define AI truly?
Number one, I love that you start there because almost every conversation I have starts with what's the language?
Hmm.
And it was one of the most poignant things to me as I started my own journey is that there is not a universal definition for artificial intelligence. And there are strains that are similar and so on and so forth, but the coin or the phrase itself was actually coined in the late 1950s. And I, the definition I'm going to use today is the one actually Freddie Mac has put forward, because we're going to talk about Freddie during the course of our conversation. So I figured it was probably appropriate to use theirs.
Yes, please.
So I thought number one, recognizing that there aren't universal definitions, not only for the term artificial intelligence, but a number of other terms that are associated with the evolving technology. But Freddie defines it as artificial intelligence refers to the development of computer programs and systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. Tasks can include reasoning, learning, i.e., machine learning, problem solving, language understanding, examples such as translation and dictation software. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Freddie is one of the few that incorporates machine learning as part of their definition. Because as you described, for example, sometimes that's automation and it may include machine learning in some version of earlier traditional artificial intelligence, but in other cases, it wouldn't necessarily qualify. And I
Hmm.
think that's an important distinction to make in that my suggestion for organizations is number one, to define artificial intelligence as your organization. What does it mean to you? And not that it has to align specifically with everyone else's, but the fact that you have your own to lay it up against, asking what is someone else's definition and how
Hmm.
is it either similar or variant? Because that cascade comes into play even from a compliance perspective as individual states begin to identify and define what artificial intelligence is. So, from a lender perspective, recognizing, wait, how did we define it as an institution and what are our protocols surrounding it? And in turn, then marrying that to whatever it be the regulator or the investor, whomever we happen to be having the conversation with, and identifying, like I said, those similarities or differences, and the organization having a deep enough understanding of what those pieces mean so that they can readily plug in what might be necessary from a compliance standpoint.
Mm. And it's interesting because there's a couple of things I'm thinking about as it relates to AI that remind me of 15 years ago when everyone was excited about offshoring. And it was like, let's go, let's do it, let's get folks offshore. And then, you go into contract and you start training the, overseas VAs or whatever function they're performing. And then all of a sudden, whether it's your warehouse lines or your investors or the agencies, now after you've gotten down the line a bit, and started integrating this new tool into your workflow, now there are recommendations, regulations, rules that you have to abide by, and they're varied. It's not one universal.
Right.
So, as you're working with companies and thinking about their strategy for integrating AI and these executive teams, where would you say companies are getting it right or leaders are getting it right versus where are mistakes being made?
I think that it's a matter of, again, it goes back to that language, and I talk about demystifying the language
Mm-hmm.
and understanding what are these groups, whether it be offshore or even for that matter, even a vendor choice. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to be offshore, but what is the terminology within not only the contractual relationships that are happening, but also access, as
Mm-hmm.
well as what are they doing and what parts are they touching within the system? And in essence, where's the risk? Is there, and the risk in relationship to artificial intelligence, interestingly enough, the cyber component of it, it's an important piece, and that part of it hasn't necessarily changed because of artificial intelligence. But I think back to, even, for example, when we started to do business with organizations and looking at who within those organizations would have access to systems, how in
Mm-hmm.
fact they were accessing it. And now, for example, I mean, that was many years ago. If you look at the same things today, and I use the terminology again, leveling up with the lens of AI, what is different about that review and that analysis when the letters AI are involved than it would have been, for example, even when the contracts were undertaken?
Mm-hmm.
And for what it's worth, I think that's a big component of it. And heightened awareness. Number one, it's coming from Freddie by virtue of the governance components that are in effect as of March. But it's also a matter of looking at those third party service providers, which, again, not a new rule. Okay, CFPB put those mandates out many years ago, and not, again, it's not new. Variation of states have variation of regulations associated with the same pieces. So, what is it that you have in place today? And how are you reviewing that leveling up with the lens of AI? And what does that mean in association, for example, in a given use case? And how do those use cases cascade through your mortgage loan process? And one risk size doesn't fit all. Number one, some organizations may decide not to undertake a given use case because, from their own risk perspective, the risk, it falls outside their confidence and comfort parameters. On the other hand, you could have an organization that has a deeper or stronger infrastructure and
Mm-hmm.
feels that because those guardrails are in place, in fact, the risk level, it's not a red for them, it's a green because they have the guardrails that align with the methodology and so forth that's being used. And when I say methodology, the methodology of artificial intelligence that's applicable to the use case.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're working with organizations and thinking through whether or not it makes sense to use AI or integrate AI,
Mhm.
um, I got to imagine it goes back to the questions that you asked at MBA annual oftentimes, right? Does this help us deliver on budget? Does this help us deliver on time? Does this achieve what we set out to achieve? What will our adoption be like? Have you found that the use of AI can help achieve those means more quickly or more effectively?
Absolutely, when done right. And again, right doesn't necessarily mean the same way for every organization. But
Yeah.
for example, what I would say, what I see happen regularly, and what I would humbly suggest might need to be done differently, is that it's the it, no, you're gonna laugh. I can't actually take him down because he's holding up my monitor. I was gonna say, I literally have a squirrel on my desk and he's painted silver, right? Like he's a shiny squirrel. Like, oh,
Mhm.
let's go chase him. Okay. It's a reminder not to chase the shiny objects, but to actually look at, and it's the foundation of what I work from in the definition of responsible AI, in
Yeah.
that when we take AI systems and build them around our organization's mission, values, goals, and risk tolerances while still delivering a transformative outcome. So instead of, for example, jumping into the demo because it sounds like, wow, it can go help me with that. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't do that, but I'm suggesting that we step back and look at mission goals, values, risk tolerances, and identify we as leaders likely know what's not working within our organizations,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we can't do everything all at once. So if we it's an early part of the year, so our goals are still pretty fresh, right?
Hmm.
So looking at those goals and aligning use cases that are going to give you the most value for the things that are drivers of business. And in some cases that can be business creation, in some cases it can be business execution, in some cases it can be procurement or maintaining relationships beyond the closure of the loan itself, and all the dynamics that are being created because of um, large entities growing in different and expansive directions. And what's that cascade to a standard business model? All of those things, it's everywhere all at once, as we say, right?
Totally everywhere all at once, business and personal life. I think of um, the responsible adoption element and that being the lens that you're using when you work with clients to make sure that they are deploying AI in the right places at the right time. And I wonder, do you have a blanket recommendation or does it vary case by case of, okay, let's try something as a beta versus we'll get a clearer understanding of this being a good tool or not if we release a company wide all at once?
I think it depends on the use case.
Hmm.
And depending on which reports you look at, there are some pretty staggering and not good ways about the number of pilots that don't actually come out of pilot. So,
Mm,
and oftentimes that tends to be related to maybe jumping in before you looked at the whole.
yeah.
Again, number of reports from the likes of Boston Consulting and MIT that talk about the importance of strategy. It's
Hmm.
I don't think anyone ever would have said it was unimportant, but the critical nature of why it's different today, because one of the things it strikes me is that I'll say smaller to mid-sized mortgage lenders tend to look at things from a perspective of here's my problem, here's my solution, here's my problem, here's my solution.
Yeah.
And with AI, I'd say it's one of the fundamental considerations that needs to be done differently because of how things have the capacity to interplay within each other.
Yeah.
Standing back and instead of one offing, I'm not saying you don't do one off because you need to start, and starting is really important. But if you start at point A, you shouldn't start at point A with at least having a sense of how will those pieces play together in a larger objective. And even from a contractual perspective and an infrastructure side of the equation, instead of it being one-off solutions, it's possible or even probable at this point that there are ways to connect those pieces together so that even if you're starting with step one, that step one is functional and feasible to take you steps three, four, and five because you did the work behind the curtain and it's setting you up for those next use cases down the path.
When I led operations and technology for Lower, an IMB here in Columbus, Ohio, this was, I mean, years ago now, but we partnered with Candor for
Mhm.
automated underwriting. And so this is automation. I don't know if, would this count as AI? I don't think this counts as AI.
Candor, correct. I believe that they would identify themselves as a rules based system.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I think so too. That sounds familiar. So what I found was, and this was a different time. Maybe it's not the case today. This is my experience when I was in the role and led this initiative was it was early on and we had Candor for automated underwriting conditions. And we said, we don't need an underwriter for this processor. We're going to use Candor as long as it fits this criteria. It's this loan type. It's this risk category. We've got reps and warrants relief on the back end. We're okay. Follow this. Unless, and this is where I made a mistake. We said, unless there's something that you see that you feel wasn't picked up by Candor, and then you can escalate certain things to underwriting. And Brooke, can you guess what happened?
Everything got escalated.
Everything got escalated.
And I think you bring up a perfect point. I think it goes back to leadership, and that thank you for sharing your experience, number one, right? Because you didn't know what you didn't know.
Right.
I think that's part of it, that we need to be kind to ourselves, is this is a consistent learning process as the AI continues to evolve. But when we stand back and think about mortgage banking as a whole, we have spent decades putting pressure, knowingly or unknowingly, on individuals, saying it's your decision that is going to make or break us financially. Is it a good decision? Obviously, there were tools. We had AUS and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, that human ink, pen to paper, needed to sign off on a loan. Still true today, right?
Yeah.
So, why is it, from a leadership perspective, that we would have the presumption that we've spent decades training individuals to say your thought process, your impact, your review is critical to this process, to suddenly press a button, you should accept it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And well, I was just going to say, and the point, part of my point being there is that it's not that they shouldn't accept it. It's that we as leaders need to spend more time understanding what's different and how we can help people who have helped us, quite frankly, made us as industry leaders and organizations. Like, we wouldn't be here if we hadn't made good underwriting decisions, right?
Right.
That because that how that facilitates, what does it look like going forward, and spend time understanding culturally the mindset of our people. And when eh, we talk about language and demystifying the language, and
Mm-hmm.
language is the foundation of culture. Culture being defined as the dominant thoughts and beliefs of our people. So, what are we doing as leaders to address that mindset in the age of AI? Because people are fearful, potentially,
That's right.
whether they share it or not. Some are excited, a lot are afraid. Well,
Yeah.
human beings don't generally move in a place of fear, or from a place of fear, right? That's not Brooke saying it, that's psychology.
That's right.
So it's once again, a fundamental piece that's variant with evolving AI, is recognizing what's the culture of our organization, what are the use cases that are being chosen, and
Mm-hmm.
how do we mirror map those things together so that we bring people along, not just, wait, here's new technology and this is what it's going to do for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I use the terminology earlier and more often. Even if
Yeah.
the use case isn't around a given department, for lack of a better description, right? Like, it's not uncommon that people will start on the front side with the sales process.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if your use case happens to be sales focused, to bring in people who are willing to consider different, who are ultimately would be ambassadors for the program,
Mm-hmm.
because this isn't like define the. It's not a matter of, oh, say what artificial intelligence means and everyone just automatically accepts it and let's move on.
Right.
It's this iteration that needs to be brought to the table frequently, so that organizations and individuals can understand what's the impact to them. And then at a leadership level, whether it's talked about reskilling or upskilling, looking at what those workflows look like.
Mm-hmm.
Because, okay, sorry, you got me on my soapbox here. Um,
Right.
One of the issues is that where AI, it'll get tagged as AI didn't work, when in fact it was the process that
That's right.
we, in essence, put technology over a process that was inefficient to begin with. So another key component in relationship to what's different in evolving AI is understanding intimately your workflows, because that's where your confidence is. You know what works, you know what's not working, and then understand the methodology of whatever solution you're bringing to the table. What does it do by design? And how does that marry to your existing workflow processes? Not, for example, just layering on a
Mm-hmm.
technology to something that very well could be done differently in the first place because of the technology that's being incorporated.
Definitely. And in the case that I gave around when I was leading with the Candor automated underwriting, what we figured out was we were asking our top most senior processing staff to kind of be like a super sleuth in this and like
Mhm.
find the gotcha moment on the technology, find where it breaks so that we can give that feedback and correct it and have less of it in the future. But it just bloated our costs, like our underwriting costs per loan actually increased quite a bit because we were paying for the technology and for the
Yeah,
underwriting staff.
right.
Um, and so what we realized was some of our best people were becoming a blocker to increased ROI on implementing technology. And so we flipped it on its head and we hired or had some green bean processors that didn't really know much about mortgage.
Mhm.
And we asked them, use this software. There was no escalation path. Behind the scenes, we had certain criteria that if the loan fell into it, we had a pipeline view where we could keep an eye on that and take
The
a look
human
at
in
it.
the loop, right? I mean, you had
Yeah.
that oversight. Now it's called human in the loop. Wouldn't have been back then, right?
I love that. I am going to steal that, Brooke. I'm going to
Yeah.
use human in the loop all the time. Thank you.
Mhm.
And it'll sound so much more credible now, too. So thank you for that. Human in the loop. Uh, we got such better results. We started to achieve the results that we had hoped for all along. But you're right. There was a lot of distrust around automation or technology doing work of mortgage experts as a result of that in my organization for a little while. We got some more pushback. There was some more resistance from the processing team, from the underwriting team, et cetera. And so when you can partner with a company like Bridge AI Advisory, my assumption is, and you'll have to tell me, but my assumption is you're helping people to avoid those pitfalls that are natural when you're new at something.
Yes, and part of the rationale behind that is that even some of these things, for example, you're talking about an experience that you had a number of years back. It's
Hmm.
not gotten that has not lessened with evolving artificial intelligence. I would suggest that it's greater. And
Really?
really it's just a matter of having an awareness, having the conversation, having that be part of the dialogue and why for example, given the example that you just described, it's possible that an organization would decide to not start in an underwriting standpoint, that they may try and put their toe in the water, so to speak, at a different point in the process. But they're doing it strategically because it's not that they're not gonna do next. And
Hmm.
there are a number of examples of organizations who start with AI on the back side of the equation, in the QC side, right? In part because if we understand what we did wrong at the end and we can fix it earlier in the process, and AI is very good at that. With the advancements that have come with computer vision and natural language processing and so forth to be able to queue things up differently, and navigate them and monitor them through the loan process differently than technology would have existed even 5 years ago. Those are things that can make a marked difference.
Hmm.
But unless you're extraordinarily large, you're likely not going to do all of those things at the same time.
Right.
So, but that's where it comes back to what's the thing that's going to give you the most value organizationally. And in some cases, it's an investment to get a return. In some
Hmm.
cases, it's a reduction in cost. And for example, I talked to many whose objective in utilizing artificial intelligence is to be able to do exponentially more and not hire.
Hmm.
But that means that teams have to work together to actually get it to work in
Yeah.
order so that you don't end up in this scenario, for example, that you were in. And by the way, many companies had not dissimilar experiences.
Well, thank you. I feel, like a normie now, but
I
but
think
you learn.
yeah, exactly.
You
And I
learn.
think that's part of the critical part of it is that no one has all the answers. But we can make better choices by asking better questions.
Yeah.
And that stems from having a deeper understanding other than what I refer to as the cocktail conversation around artificial intelligence.
How does that go? The cocktail conversation.
Oh, it's just the fun one that you have at IMB or MBA, and people are telling you, what are they working on? Who's doing this? And I mean, it's just surface things, which are, I think, they're not unimportant. And there's a facilitation of learning there, but it's not necessarily why you would jump in to doing a particular
Hmm.
project. It's
Yeah.
do the greater work And I'm not suggesting that this has to be this elongated, months and weeks and months process. In my experience, most organizations have the answers. They
Yeah.
just may not have them pulled together in a way that everything syncs together in a format that would be useful.
I can relate to that. There are a couple of AI solutions in the market right now that come to mind where I'm thinking, like, man, I wish I would have had these when I was leading at an IMB. And one is Accelerate has Athena, which can help loan officers in a call center environment in real time to better like interact with people. There is this immediate coaching. Are you familiar with this one,
I
Brooke?
I don't know it directly, but I've seen demos, and I know they have high reviews.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like, hey, like this person has mentioned that their spouse just died and that's why they need to refinance. Before you ask them the balance of their mortgage, acknowledge human to human, human in the loop, human to human, acknowledge that, that's a hard position to be in. Like, here are some things you could say, right? Like those kind of like coaching and then performance scoring. I remember being a call center loan officer 16 years ago and having a QA team listen to our calls afterwards, score them, and then send that data to our managers. And our managers every couple of weeks would be like, "Oh, we got
It
this,
was
from
after the fact, right?
this call from 3 weeks ago." Well, what are you going to do about that now?
Yeah.
Call somebody back and say, "Oh, sorry, you mentioned that your spouse just died, and that's why you needed to refinance. You didn't do the loan with me, but like, I'm sorry your spouse passed away. Like, any chance you want to do that loan now?" Like,
Right.
no, you missed the moment.
Right. And that,
Um,
I think that you bring up a great point in that, and that's this evolution of, because those calls were being recorded for years, right? I mean,
yes,
that the physical recording of the call isn't new, but the
right.
manner in which it can be done and the speed with which the feedback can be given is exponentially different than what some of the legacy systems would provide for.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think in one other point, interestingly, that you bring up there, and it comes back to the whole responsible AI piece in relationship to individual organizations making choices that fit their profiles.
Mhm.
And that's not, there's obviously legal components of when you disclose certain things, but then there are some that aren't necessarily legal black and white, but they're choices that an organization will make about the utilization of AI, and voice in particular is getting so crazy good that you don't necessarily even recognize that you're talking to some version of artificial intelligence because it sounds truly so human. So those are just, again, those are considerations that each individual organization needs to make, not only at a risk, but also a fit from a cultural perspective and some of those other things. And again, early reports on some of these systems that are making those calls, they're pretty, like, they're jaw dropping in the amount of capture that comes through with them, as well as the passing off. Again, another piece of the equation. At what point does someone, at what point is it disclosed that it's an avatar or some version of assistant that's not human?
Mhm.
And at what point can they quickly, how quickly can they offboard if someone starts out saying, yes, I'm interested, to wait, I want human? How,
Mm.
like, what's that off ramp look like, and how effectively can that be done?
My friend, Chris Miller, he's a mentor of mine. He has a company called XRep, and it's exactly what you're talking about. They can do text, but TCPA has made it really
Yeah,
complex to text, right?
yeah.
Or the voice AI. And I played around with it a little bit when he was getting it started. It was too slow. It was too fast, like where it's interrupting.
Yeah.
They did come quickly to a really nice middle ground where you can have a fluid conversation with an AI agent. And it does disclose immediately that it's AI.
Mhm.
And I think that's interesting because that was a business choice and an ethics choice that they made,
Yeah.
but it's not a requirement today, right? There's
No,
no
not
regulation
not in
requiring
most
that.
cases. Some states have requirements, or at least they're under consideration. But yes, though, and again, these are the dynamics when we say level up with the lens of AI. That
Hmm.
whatever it is we thought we knew, I would say it's simply best practice to say, okay, well, because the letters are AI are involved, is there something that we need to validate differently? And legal counsel in many cases may need to be involved in that. Again, that's not new.
Well, we could talk forever on this topic. It's just such a fun one.
Yeah, it's
And
you stay busy.
and I think the key I really could go on. SnapDoc's got a great like CD prep, CD balancing tool that they're like demoing now, and they've got a pilot group with Lone Vision's AI tool for P&L management support in the moment is huge. There's a lot going on that's really good as it relates to AI, and then there's some homegrown stuff that I'm really excited about too that I've seen from some IMBs, frankly, supporting getting back in front of previously closed clients at the right time for a refi
Right.
opportunity. There's just so much cool stuff going on as it relates to AI. But two questions for you. The first one, second to last question. Freddie Mac has some guidance around or rules even around use of AI within mortgage companies beginning in March. So can you give us the scoop on that? What's happening?
Um, I'm going to actually back up first because in interestingly enough, is 2024 Bulletin 2024-16. Sorry, give me 1 second. There we go. Um, 2024 16 came out with framework with requirements around executives signing off on policies and procedures in relationship to infosec and controls related to artificial intelligence, and also the um, the indemnifications, the legalities around use, and ultimately, no surprise, lenders responsible regardless if you're using a third party, right? So I mean,
Mhm.
again, on the surface, it's not shocking, but the reality of it is that the depth with which it could impact the business, I think, is greater when the letters AI are involved. In so 2025-16 um, brought in AI, artificial intelligence governance.
Mhm.
And I like to describe, in that context of governance, they speak readily to governance having it being trustworthy. And it goes back to that language and how these words get tossed around. And who doesn't know what trustworthy is? Like, we all have a reference point to trustworthy, right? We all have a reference point to responsible. Well, are they the same thing? Are they not?
Mhm.
I would say the framework, because of the study that I've done, I classify them a little bit differently. Trustworthy AI is the overarching goal, and there are trustworthy AI principles that are outlined in the NIST risk management framework that's referenced within the Freddie Mac responsibility side of the equation. It's the suggestion is to use that as the framework, which we are doing.
Mhm.
And then responsible AI are the robust development practices. So you've got an overarching goal, and then you've got robust development practices. Aligning with that, the approach to deploying AI systems that align with an organization's mission, values, goals, risk tolerances, while still delivering a transformative business outcome. That piece is the responsible piece. And
Mhm.
then you have AI governance, and governance are the mechanisms that organizations put in place to be able to address providing responsible AI with trustworthy principles spread across people, policy, platforms, and process.
That makes sense.
So and again, it's the study behind it that allowed me, because again, when you first hear these words, I'm like, oh, well, those two words are interchangeable. And
Mm.
the reality of it is that some people use those words interchangeably. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that if it's not quite what you mean, it's important to level set on those understandings, whether it be, for example, with a vendor or within your own organization. And that clarity helps our employees ultimately know that we understand what we're getting into. We have a purpose behind what's the goal in us undertaking these new technologies. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that if we don't have adoption, even if we've chosen the best technology, it becomes a waste of money. And I'm a
Hmm.
firm believer that nobody has money to waste.
That's right. Well, Brooke, my last question for you is you're an expert in this. I am just somebody who enjoys it. What haven't I asked that would be helpful for the audience to know?
I'm sorry, ask me the question again?
Yeah, like what should the audience know? What didn't I ask? Like what's
Oh,
going on
what
out
didn't
there that I
I'm
didn't
sorry, what
ask?
didn't you ask?
Yeah,
I think you covered it really well, Julia. There's
thank you.
yeah, great job. I think that it's really about maybe it's not so much about what they didn't do, it's about doing it differently. Because I think that's one of the pressures around artificial intelligence is that everything is new and must have and so on and so forth. I think it's a matter of literally looking at the things and the processes in the decisioning methodologies that would use to do something today and learning at a very organizational level what about the new technologies is going to make your process different and how can you be asking different questions to get better answers because
Mm,
if we apply the same methodology and we go back to those three questions the challenges that have existed for decades in mortgage um, how just because we overlay the letters AI does not indicate a definitively better outcome.
that's right. Well, Brooke, this was such an important conversation today. Um, what I appreciate so much about this discussion is that you're reframing AI as what it actually is, which is a systems amplifier. It can amplify clarity or it can amplify chaos. So we have to have leaders that are critical thinkers and employees that understand and can align and relate our AI use case to our company's vision, mission, values. We don't want to amplify dysfunction, so we've got to still have a really solid foundation outside of AI. And so that means that the real work extends beyond implementation, it's alignment. So anyone who's listening and thinking, we've got to think more about this intentionally, you're right. At Telescope Advisors, this is exactly where we operate, helping executive teams zoom out, assess operational readiness, align leadership, and implement change in a way that actually sticks. And if it's AI adoption specifically or anything related to AI that you're looking for, I would say that Brooke and her company, Bridge AI Advisory, is a great place to start. If this episode sparks something for you, share it with a leader in your organization. Get the conversation started. And if you want to explore what responsible, systems-driven adoption looks like inside your business, you know where to find Brooke and I. Our contact information will be included in the show notes. Until next time, stay focused, aligned, and keep looking in.
Thank you, Julia. It's great to see you.